The story begins with a man swimming in the sea. While swimming, he spotted an old-looking chest. When he opened the chest, some things spilled out. Among those items was a green mask that came to the surface. After that, we see Stanley. He worked at a bank. He told a female colleague of his, "I have 2 tickets. They're for a very big show. Would you like to come with me?" But the girl replied quickly that she had a friend who loved that kind of show. Saying this, she flirted a little with Stanley, and in the end took both tickets. Poor Stanley was so naive that he gave both tickets away and didn't go to the show himself. As soon as the girl left, Stanley's friend came up to him and said, "Man, when will you ever learn? Don't you see these people take advantage of you?" Just then, a very beautiful woman named Tina entered the bank. Stanley and his friend were stunned the instant they saw Tina. She put her bag on the table and immediately started talking to Stanley. She said she wanted to open a new account at the bank. But the truth was that Tina's bag contained a hidden camera that was recording every part of the bank. In fact, her boyfriend was planning to rob the bank and Tina was helping him. That was why she had come. Our innocent Stanley knew nothing about any of this. He found Tina extremely attractive and said to his friend, "What a girl, man. She's trouble, really." But his friend told him to forget it. "There'll be a party tonight. You'll meet lots of girls like her there." Then Stanley remembered his car was broken. How would he go to the party at night? When he went to the garage, the mechanic told him, "Look, this will take time. If you really need a car, take mine." The mechanic's car was such junk that it had no limits to how terrible it was. Out of necessity, Stanley had to take that worthless car. When he reached the party location, the guards didn't let him in. They said this place wasn't for broke people like him. Come back when you have money. Stanley felt deeply humiliated and left. On the way back, near a bridge, that crappy car broke down. He was already upset, and now he became furious. In anger, he got out of the car and looked toward the water in the dark of night. For a moment, he thought there might be a dead body in the water. Then Stanley wondered if the person might be alive, and without much thinking, he walked into the water. When he jumped in and reached the spot, it turned out not to be a human at all, but a heap of floating garbage. But there, he found that green mask shown at the beginning of the story. Stanley found the mask very interesting. Its design looked quite antique, so he happily took the mask home with him. Stanley also had a dog. As soon as the dog saw the mask, it started barking loudly. Stanley managed somehow to calm the dog and then, standing in front of a mirror, thought, "Let me try it on and see how it looks on me." As soon as he put the mask on, it stuck to his face. He tried a lot, but the mask wouldn't come off. It felt as if it had fused completely to his face. Stanley's face turned completely green. His behavior changed completely too. It felt like it wasn't Stanley standing there anymore. He began moving in strange ways, and his agility increased greatly. When he stepped out of his flat, a woman outside saw him and became terrified. That woman had a green face pack applied to her face, but Stanley was now looking like a full-on cartoon. Frightened, the woman pulled out a gun. To escape from her, Stanley jumped straight out of a window, from some floor, it's unclear which. And when he fell, he started bouncing like a crazy ball. Now out on the road below, he suddenly found himself in front of a car, making the driver blow the horn loudly. Stanley said, "All right, horn, you can toot. That's all you can do." He took a small horn from his pocket and blew it. But when he pressed it, that small gadget made an enormous bang. The sound was so loud that all the car windows shattered. The driver's hair stood on end. Then Stanley went to the mechanic who had been fixing his car. Because of that mechanic's junk car, he had been humiliated so badly. And in his anger, he trashed everything there. After that, he went back home and went to sleep as if nothing had happened. He was exhausted from doing so many bizarre things. The next day, when Stanley got up, his face had returned to normal. He didn't know how the mask had come off. When he looked at himself in the mirror, he remembered fragments of the night's events and thought maybe it had all been just a dream. Then somebody knocked on his flat door. It was a policeman. He asked, "Do you remember anything from last night?" With him was the same woman who had been frightened by the green-masked man. She had called the police and told them a green-masked man had been wandering around and had been very frightening. Stanley inwardly realized they were talking about him, but he said, "Sir, I don't know anything. I was asleep the whole time." The policeman left after hearing that. Stanley picked up the mask and said, "This mask is making me do very strange things. I don't feel right with it," and he threw the mask out of the window. But the mask returned to the room by itself. Later, Stanley went to his office and the bank manager scolded him harshly. "Why are you late? This is your father's bank." Stanley replied that he hadn't been feeling well and hadn't slept properly last night. The manager wouldn't listen and continued to lecture him even more. Stanley came home very dejected and sat in silence. Then his eye fell on a newspaper. There was a picture of Tina in it. She was a singer and was going to give a live performance at that extravagant club which had earlier thrown him out. Stanley decided, "I must get into that club no matter what." But the problem was that only rich people were allowed in. The entry pass cost so much that he couldn't afford it. Then his eyes fell again on the green mask. The mask was still lying on his sofa. He was surprised because he had thrown it out, but thought maybe the mask had come into his life to help him. He decided to try one more time and put the mask on again. As soon as he wore it, his face turned green again. It was as if by magic his clothes changed too, and he instantly went to the same bank where he worked, this time to create a commotion and rob it so he could use the money to get an entry to the club. Stanley reached the bank, but Tina's accomplices were already there. In fact, they had planned to rob the bank that very day. They stood outside the bank trying to figure out how to steal when Stanley smashed the bank's glass and leapt out, scolding the people standing there. "This is how you'll rob a bank? After you, I'll come and rob it too." Saying that, he disappeared with lightning speed. He ran so fast no one could see him. Soon the police arrived and, thinking the men in black clothes were the robbers, opened fire on them. The gang also fired back and, seizing the chance, escaped. Meanwhile, Stanley arrived at the club in a very long limousine. He gave the bouncer a lot of money and went inside. Tina was performing on stage, singing, and Stanley went up to her and danced wildly with her. Tina enjoyed his incredibly fast, stormy moves. She probably assumed Stanley was some very rich man. At that moment, Tina's two friends who had been planning the bank robbery also came to the club. The gang members told their leader that the man dancing with Tina was the one who had robbed the bank. On the leader's orders, everyone started shooting at Stanley. But Stanley was faster than lightning, so not a single bullet reached him. Soon the police also arrived at the club. The police told Tina's accomplices, "We saw you outside the bank, and now you're firing guns here in public. Do you know what a grave crime that is, endangering the public?" The police arrested everyone and said that if it was proven later that they hadn't robbed the bank, they would be released. Tina's friend Dorian, who was the leader of that gang, said, "There will be proof only when that green-faced man is found, because he's the real thief." At that moment, one of the police officers noticed a piece of a tie, a torn bit of tie, and remembered, "I saw a tie like that at the flat of that guy." Now the police began to suspect that Stanley might have been the one who robbed the bank. After all, he worked at the bank, so it would have been easy for him to steal. And besides, his salary wouldn't normally get him into that club. Only rich people went there. The officer immediately went to Stanley's house. He asked Stanley if the tie was his, and, "Tell me, how did you get into that club? You're just a lowly bank employee." Stanley lied and said, "I didn't go to the bar. I was looking for my tie. Thank you for finding it. That was the robbery." The next day, when Stanley went to the bank, his boss scolded him again. This time Stanley snapped, saying sharply, "Don't shout at me again, or I'll beat you up, you jerk." At that time, Tina came into the bank to meet Stanley. She asked him, "You meet new people like that every day? Do you know any green-faced man? I think he might be someone who just painted his face." Stanley didn't tell her the truth. He said, "Yes, I know someone. If you want, I can arrange for you to meet him tonight." Tina was pleased, and they fixed a time and place to meet. Stanley went home thinking he needed to find out something about this mask. He took it to a mask expert. This man knew almost everything there was to know about masks from around the world. The man told him about a god named Loki who was mischievous and childlike, and who had a mask that gave powers like the one Stanley described. Stanley said, "Yes, maybe this is that mask. Whenever I put it on, I'm not myself. I change completely and start doing strange things." To prove his point, Stanley put the mask on in front of the expert. But nothing happened. The expert then said, "Don't waste my time. Get out of here." Stanley realized maybe the mask only worked at night or only when he was alone. It was night now, and he was supposed to meet Tina. He quickly put the mask on and went to the meeting place, but the police were there watching him. The police surrounded Tina and Stanley. Tina became frightened and ran away. Stanley pretended to freeze in place, but in the excitement of the mask, he forgot that the cops could still see him. The officers closed in on him from all sides. Then Stanley screamed in a strange voice. The scream seemed to unsettle everyone's minds. By the charm of that magical mask, all the people fell under his control. 2 seconds later, the police were dancing with him. Seeing his chance, Stanley bolted across the street and took off the mask. He was suddenly Stanley again, completely normal. A girl drove up in a car. She was Stanley's friend. She saw he looked a little scared, so she put him in her car and drove him away. This girl was a reporter by profession. She said, "I'll tell your story to the world. Tell me what happened." Poor naive Stanley told her everything honestly. "I have a mask. When I wear it, I change completely. The police are after me now." But here the story took a dangerous twist. Stanley didn't know that the reporter girl was deceiving him. She too was connected to Dorian's gang. Dorian had paid the reporter to bring Stanley to him. He had promised her a big reward in return. After that, the gangsters caught Stanley and tortured him severely. They hung him upside down. Soon Dorian arrived and began interrogating Stanley. "Tell me how this mask works. If you don't, you'll die." Stanley pleaded, "Brother, ask me nicely and I'll tell you. I'll tell you everything. Just let me go. Just put the mask on and you'll understand everything." As soon as Dorian put the mask on, his face turned completely green. He looked like a dangerous villain. A different kind of power entered him. He decided he would never give the mask to anyone else under any circumstances. He feared that if the police saw him wearing that green mask, they would think he was the bank robber. He hatched a plan. He would plant a duplicate mask in Stanley's pocket and get Stanley arrested. He sent his men to Stanley's house to bring back the money that, according to their story, Stanley had stolen from the bank. But Stanley's dog Milo was secretly watching them. Milo saw that his owner was bound inside the car with tape over his mouth. When the thieves came out with the money, Milo quietly followed them. Meanwhile, Dorian had had a fake mask made. Following the plan, he put that fake mask into Stanley's pocket. The plan was that the police would find the mask in Stanley's pocket and assume Stanley was the real green-masked man. Dorian's men picked Stanley up and dumped him right in front of the police. The officers found the mask in his pocket and, without thinking, sent him to jail. When Tina learned about this, she went to the prison to see Stanley. This time Stanley told her everything honestly. Actually, I'm the green-faced man who danced with you that day. But the mask is no longer with me. Your friend stole the real mask. He's a very dangerous man. You have to stop him. Stanley explained that, as far as he understood, the mask affected the mind of whoever wore it. He said, I'm a simple, naive, kind guy, so I act funny and do bizarre things. But Dorian is a terrible man. He won't stop at the bank. He'll loot the entire city. He'll destroy everything. Tina said, how can I stop him alone? I'm leaving the city anyway. Stanley's words made Tina realize how awful Dorian really was, and she decided to never meet him again. After that, she left the prison, but Dorian became suspicious and sent his men after her. Meanwhile, Stanley's dog Milo had secretly followed the gangsters all the way to the jail. The guard there was asleep, so Milo took the key from the guard's pocket and quietly freed Stanley from the lockup. Just then a police officer arrived, but Stanley pointed a gun at him and, seeing his chance, escaped from the jail. Elsewhere, Dorian had kidnapped Tina. After putting the mask on, Dorian had become even more dangerous. His face was greener, more horrifying and strange than Stanley's had been. He went to a bar packed with gangsters. Some of the biggest gangsters in the city were there. He declared, from today on, I am your leader. If anyone has a problem, come forward. The gangsters didn't like his behavior and began firing at Dorian. But with the mask's power, Dorian absorbed all the bullets into himself, then spat them out forcefully, killing the attackers. After that, he bound Tina and attached a time bomb to her, saying, now try running away from here. You betrayed me, right? Just then Stanley arrived too. Tina, pretending to be repentant, spoke to Dorian, I admit I was wrong. But before I die, may I at least kiss your real face once? Dorian, too, slipped up and removed the mask. But this was all part of Tina's plan. The moment she had the chance, she kicked the mask hard. It flew through the air and Milo caught it. Now Stanley's dog Milo put the mask on and became extremely dangerous. He started attacking Dorian's men all over the place, ripping their shirts and mauling them. The poor thugs were in total disarray. Stanley picked Milo up and said, Champion, now it's my turn. After a struggle, he managed to remove the mask from his dog. Just as he was about to put the mask on himself, Dorian's men arrived and opened fire at Stanley. One bullet hit the mask and it fell away. Stanley rushed over, picked it up, and put it on. Now Stanley had become bulletproof. He had no fear. He drank a glass of juice, and wherever bullets had hit his body, juice started pouring out of those spots. Everyone was stunned. Stanley calmly went to Tina, removed the bomb from her body, and swallowed it. The bomb's timer reached 0, and an explosion occurred inside his stomach. But the mask was so powerful that Stanley was unharmed. Then Dorian lunged at Stanley to kill him, but Stanley threw him into the water and fashioned a toilet handle on a nearby tree. The handle had the word flush written on it. When Stanley pulled the handle, Dorian was flushed straight into the water. With Dorian gone, the whole city was saved from his tyranny. Stanley also rescued Tina. Just then the police arrived and were about to arrest Stanley. But a man who had been present there from the beginning spoke up. I am the mayor. Why are you arresting him? He saved everyone. The police saw Milo carrying the green mask and said, look, the dog is taking the mask somewhere. The mayor angrily ordered, don't bother with the dog. Find that thug. Understand. On the mayor's orders, the police released Stanley and began rounding up Dorian's gang. The next morning, Stanley, Tina, and Milo returned to the bridge where Stanley had found the mask. Standing near the sea, Stanley said, this mask has given me a lot, but what I truly want, this mask cannot give me. He confessed his love to Tina and said, I thought maybe you loved only the masked version of me, not the real me. Tina smiled and said, I like you as you are. She took the mask from Stanley and threw it into the sea. So if you like this video, please do subscribe to this channel.